Welcome to the 320 Podcast, where we encourage you to reach for the immeasurably more life with Christ. From discussions on Scripture, to poetic messages, to dreaming big with Jesus, you will enjoy a variety of episodes brought to you by Shelly Wilson Ministries. To find out more about Shelly Wilson Ministries and the many resources available to you, please visit our website at www.shellywilsonministries.org.
I appreciate you agreeing to come on.
Yeah.
It's not like you and I haven't known each other for, it seems like a bazillion years.
Yeah, at least like 12 or something.
It has to be, girl.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure we'll go through some of that today, but I just want to let me introduce you first to the listeners, and we'll just casually have our little discussion. But I know you as Shana Strange. I was telling you, I've got to get used to saying Shana Strange-Williams now, because I'm such a creature of habit. Our lives have been a little intertwined.
Yeah.
At least 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, off and on, here and there. Certainly we've been friends, but I've kept up with you. You've kept up with me. And and I was asking the Lord this morning, I said, you know, Lord, there's so much Shannon and I could talk about.
Yeah.
Like what do we narrow this down to, like in this hour for the people, right?
Yeah. Right.
Because you and I could probably do a whole month long of different things that we've learned through good and bad times.
Yeah.
But you know, of course, you have a song called Providence, which is one of my favorites. But you know, one of my favorites is Little Foxes. So
Yeah.
Right, that's like my all-time favorite. But yes, you have a book called Providence, and I was like, you know, maybe that's really the good topic, because I work with a lot of, you know, dreamers here. I know you have in your walk too. And what does that even mean, right? What I was looking up the definition, and you probably have a better one, but Websters just says divine guidance or care.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess maybe let's start by, why was that such a big deal in your life to talk about Providence? And then maybe let's take them where all the unexpected things that show up that you never think are coming. You never expect to be there, right?
Yeah. You know, I was actually thinking about that book this morning before you even brought it up, and I was thinking, I think I'm going to do like a weekly little chat on my page where, you know, maybe some people want to go through it and read it chapter by chapter and just do a live, because
that would be great.
I just think that it's such a word and a topic that, especially right now, I think a lot of people can relate to. But, you know, when I first started thinking about Providence, it wasn't like I was sitting around thinking about, what does this word mean? I mean, honestly, it's not a word I would have used in my vocabulary. I wouldn't have walked around and talked to people about it. I mean, it's not a very common word, you know.
Right.
And so I didn't even intend to write that song. I just, you know, as we do, us creatives, sometimes you just sit down to write, and whatever comes out. And that's what happened. I ended up writing, and that word came out. And over the years, it became a word, and I think a life message. So I've had to live this out. It is not just like a cute little word that I get to talk about. It is literally my life.
Exactly.
And it's not easy, and it doesn't always feel pretty, and it doesn't make sense. But I still believe that the definition that you gave is very similar, I think, to what I put in the book. But the one that I came across that made sense to me is, it's God conceived as the power guiding and sustaining human destiny.
Right.
And I think every time I think about that, I think about Joseph. I think about some of the major characters in the Bible. I mean, they're all major, but you know what I mean? Just like, especially Joseph, and how you see God just really just changing, you know, moving him, putting him in places, transitioning him in and out. And I'm sure it never made sense. And that's really how my life felt. It felt like that I had these huge dreams when I was younger, and I had them my whole life. A lot of them were about music. And then, of course, as I got older, they kind of expanded into writing and not just songwriting, but writing books. And then speaking, I realized I had a speaking gift.
Yeah.
And I started to really just think, I feel like I'm supposed to do this like full time. And so as the world does things, I took on that same kind of human, secular wisdom that says, well, you just have to try really hard and you just have to
Yep.
get out there and work really hard and make it happen. Well, that's not the way the kingdom works.
That's right.
And so I just hit a lot of roadblocks, a lot of disappointment, and a lot of frustrating detours.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of came to this place where for me, what I've realized is it's really just all about surrender.
Mm-hmm.
It's surrendering to whatever season you're in.
Yeah.
And not like defeated, not like upset about it, and like you just want to give up, but just whatever reason, this God is guiding and sustaining this part of my destiny. He wants me to do this, and embracing that, just like Jesus
Right.
embraces his life. I very seriously doubt Jesus wanted to come be born in a dirty, nasty stable
Yep.
and give his
Yeah.
life up for ungrateful people. I mean, he could have done anything, but he surrendered
Well,
to the will of the
we
Father.
well, we see that when he was
Yeah.
begging for the cup to be removed.
Yeah, right.
It he knew what was coming. He knew what was coming, and was asking the Father, would there be another way?
Yeah. Is there an easier way, please? Let there be.
Yeah.
But there was.
No. Mm-mm.
And
No.
I think, yeah. Well, I just think on this side of heaven, there's a lot of unfulfilled desires that
Right.
will be fulfilled in the age to come. But that's probably way down the road in the talk about Providence. But I think we long for things that maybe don't exist in this lifetime. And that's okay. And you have to kind of reconcile that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we were actually talking. I had some dreamers here on the podcast with me who were in the frustrating stage,
Yeah.
and I wanted to capture that live because it's real and raw.
Mm-hmm.
It can be quite emotional, and I think it's a teachable moment, because I said to them, I said, for a little girl, all I wanted you to do was be on the Grand Ole Opry, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You're right. You have all these dreams.
Yeah.
So then I get saved, want to sing for Jesus, and I think I've realized that was so limiting,
Right. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yet it still was. Can I be? Sometimes we want what we want, Shanna.
Yeah. Right.
And I said to them, I said, when we've all talked about, I said, when we go look at the scriptures, Moses. Now, granted, he made an error, but he didn't enter into that promised land. And then
Mhm.
some of them died without yet seeing the fulfillment.
Yes. Yeah.
And can I be okay with that
Yeah.
if that's me?
Right.
Maybe
Yeah.
my big stage is in glory.
Yeah. Right. And that's something that we all have to answer. And
Yeah.
I came to that place where was I gonna, chase after stages and
Yeah.
platforms, or was I gonna chase after the heart of God? And
Mm-hmm.
so I ultimately chose to go after the heart of God. And what that did is, and you know this because I believe you walk through this a lot too. Okay, well, he stripped me back to where it was literally
Yep.
just me and him for a long time. And I'm still honestly kind of in that place right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't sing on big stages anymore, and I'm honestly glad. I'm
Me either. Me either.
relieved.
Yeah.
And it's these really intimate, precious times where the Lord has revealed to me something I never understood before, was that there's so much power in the gift that He's given. Probably, I know you as well, but I know for me, He's given me this gift of intercession and prophetic
Mm-hmm.
worship.
Yeah.
And it is more powerful than when I enter into these places with Him, and what I release
Yeah.
is intense and beautiful, but I can't see it with my natural eyes. I'll
Right.
never know. I mean, all of heaven could be listening to this, but I'm all like, oh, in my previous years, I would have been like, well, there's only two people here in this room, Lord. This is so pointless. And I've
Yeah.
realized that He's had to like mature me in that, to show me okay, what you were wanting was so superficial. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you and I've talked about this a lot, because when we're so taught, even in the church, that numbers are important.
Yes.
It's why, for heaven's sakes, we got to take an attendance and put it up on a board.
Right.
Like, who cares? And it's
Right.
here, when we came into this building, we just learned the power of small groups.
Yeah.
And it was because the providence of God for me was not just, singing as a tool at times, but do you know, there was one support group night. I knew God had prepared me to sing over somebody, Shanna,
Mm-hmm.
and I just had the speaker in the room and had the microphone ready. And as soon as I figured out who it was, I got up and said, "I'm going to sing this over you," and
Yeah.
that was my big stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so critical, because I think we've taught in such error,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because we lack a lot of knowledge in the prophetic arena, for sure.
Yeah.
So for me particularly, because I come from a Baptist background where we weren't really taught about things that you probably grew up in the way of the prophetic. So how on earth? So of course I was confused about who I was going to be, because I only saw certain possibilities,
Right.
until God stripped me of everything and everyone and said, "Let me show you who you really are."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And here goes a 10-year Joseph experience. Like, it's funny you bring up Joseph, because I'm like, we don't talk about this a lot, but that whole story of Joseph, even the betrayal and everything, was providence. And
Yeah.
I look at Job and I go, so much of providence in it is an inner work,
Yes, it is.
but we want the outer work.
We do, and God's not into quick fixes. And I
No.
mean, I have a whole chapter in there. I think it's called Worship While You Wait.
Yep.
And I talk about those. I think in an earlier edition of the book, I changed it so many times, but I think I had gone through the book and I had used all this alliteration. It was like things like, I think the prison doctor was Providential Prisons or something like that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where I talk about those seasons where you are trapped and confined physically in
Yeah.
some kind of a job that for me was a job, and I talk about the job that I hated. Or,
Right.
I mean, it could be like just I mean, it could just be relationships that are hard, or it could be, just a financial situation that you can't seem to get out of. But those prison sentences that feel like to your soul, they feel so horrible. But what God's doing in those times is He's actually setting you free spiritually, but it
Yes.
doesn't feel like that.
Yeah. Or he is dealing with some character issues, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I said, I think maybe as we get, I was saying to Rissa, who was on our last podcast, that there's such a benefit to aging,
Yeah.
because, um, first of all, if God does anything massive, we won't be able to take 1 inch of credit,
Mm-mm.
but in touch His glory, right? It'll be all Him. But also, just I guess there's such a wisdom that comes in age, but there's also a, like, who cares anymore about some things that I used
Right.
to care. And that's, I think, a good thing. Like, I don't cling to. It's easier to let go of things, don't you think now, or
Yes.
what you thought things were going to be like, or
Yes. Right.
I'm just realizing that my life was always meant to be given over for people. And I guess, and I'm not saying, some people do have that platform stage, and that certainly plays a role, but some of us were called to kind of intimate, deep work in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a shepherding thing, or, like you said, intercession, which is so critical. We spent a lot of time in a prayer room here, during a season which God brought to an end. When COVID hit, girl, we went into a deep intercession in here every week for all these prayer requests that were coming through.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And there was a moment when I laid all those papers down on the ground to pray, and I knew it was over. Isn't that weird?
Right.
And I shut it down. But see, years ago, I would have hung on to that thing for another
Yeah. Yeah.
2, 3 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. I can relate to that. You just kind of drag something out, and God's like, that was just temporary.
Right. And I think that's part of Providence too, don't you? That
Oh,
there's
yeah.
seasons.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, even now, you know, back in, I guess, April, I'm in another season of working a lot. And, my heart is to do what I would consider ministry full time. And I mean, like the writing, singing, speaking, that's always been my heart, right? I mean, just like you, I enjoy that, but it's hard to make a living from it. And
Right.
but I was in such a season that I had to work. And back in April, I was so miserable at the job. I had been there almost 2 years, and I'm like, Lord, I just can't do this anymore. I was breaking down crying several. I think I texted you a couple times. I'm like,
Yeah.
please pray for me.
Yeah.
Right. I had just a handful of people, and I'd be like, I'm about to lose my mind. This job is so hard. I'm
Yeah.
getting yelled at all the time by people, and I just can't take the stress. And I'm working like 50 hours a week. And anyway, and I had just complained about it all the time. And finally, I had this moment, and I was coming home, I think, from our prayer room. I had just, done some intercession and worship. And I just kind of like had this flash of me, and I'm hanging on a cross. And it's like at that moment where the Lord is saying to me, are you just gonna get this done and die to yourself or not? Like, are you just gonna keep hanging on to this and just being ridiculous about it, or are you gonna just go ahead and die? And so I decided, like I said, I would think it's April, and I just said, I'm done. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna fight you anymore to quit this job. I'm not gonna, if this is what you want, I'm gonna surrender to it.
Yeah.
And so I did. And it was like the next month when he started giving me visions, and he was showing me a different, like a career switch where, I was doing processing, and I was seeing myself in the community in Longview, in the city, almost in a city government capacity, which kind of freaked me out because I've noticed I have to do that. But what I was seeing was I was going around, I was at all these different events and functions within the city. And then all of a sudden I started feeling like I needed to apply and get into, like a mortgage loan officer position, which actually is probably more stressful. But it could potentially be, more income and things like that.
Sure.
And so he flipped me from the support side to the actual sales side, is what they call it, which terrified me, but I did it. And of course I got the job, and that's what I'm doing now. But just that surrender, and it made no sense. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This doesn't even fit my personality, Lord. This is not on anywhere on my radar. I mean, but I was surrendered. And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You got to do what he tells you to do, because in the end, I think he's positioning you for whatever reason. There's no telling, but he had to get Joseph to that position for a reason.
Right.
He needed him there. And I feel like that's what he's doing in the body of Christ in a lot of people's lives. It's really weird the way he's positioning and aligning people, but he's got them there for a reason.
Oh, absolutely. And I haven't even talked to you about this, but talk about Providence. When we first moved into this building, it's been here 2 years, which, that's a pretty big miracle. What I've been through in my past. And there was a group of people from New Creation Ministries that came and just helped me remodel this building.
Yeah.
And so I knew when they walked in, something was happening more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've spoken for Lisa, who's a co-founder there, a couple times, and I've dropped off love letters for their ladies in the addiction recovery home and stuff. But her husband went into the hospital with COVID, was on a vent for months. They ended up calling me to come sit with her, and God just began to knit our hearts together. We became really good friends during that time. And Greg's now out of the hospital, and they do a Tuesday night chapel service. Well, girl, I'm I'm on their worship team. The Lord is leading them in a prophetic
Yeah.
future, and I step up there, don't know the music, and the Lord pulls out the prophetic word. Or who knew? And
Awesome.
talk about, but it was 2 years in the making, because see, in the providence, God knew that I would need to trust them and they would need to trust me.
Mm.
And so it took him 2 years to build our relationship where, okay, like they sharpened me. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? Like they're pursuing Jesus was everything. Like it's who I need in this season, right?
Mhm.
But two, if if I had not, I never made it happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
It,
absolutely.
because let's be honest, you and I over the last 15 years or so, there's been a lot of things I probably made happen, Shanna, that ended up dying.
Yes, yes. Born of flesh. Yeah.
Oh, totally. It was not God conceived. That's like your definition.
Hmm.
It was
Yeah.
Shelly conceived because I was going to try to help God get me. Uh,
Mm.
and so the beauty of this is I'm like, wow, Lord, that's pretty cool. I didn't have to do a thing. Didn't have to
Yeah.
do a thing. And I am suddenly in a beautiful place of worship that I've always longed for, but didn't even know was in me,
Yes. Yeah.
you know. And I think that's part of too providence of every stage. Don't you think in Joseph's story, like his gifts start being used through his process of dream interpretation?
Yeah.
And
And what I think you're saying is you didn't look for that. Like God
no,
literally to you.
totally brought it to me. And
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 I've never
and
said
what
about him. When
do
it's
that
when he's doing something, you don't have to get up in the middle of it and try to, you know,
right.
meet people or make connections happen. I mean, like he will literally bring it to you. It's crazy. That's how you know it's him.
Uh, Totally, that's how you know it's him. And it's kind of like you said when you don't sing on the big stages anymore. I don't think I realized what pressure was
Yes.
and how now it's just flowing in the spirit. It really is different.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not it's not work, if that makes any sense. It just happens. Things just happen. Um, but two, I think, like talking about you going to the job you're at now, and
Mm-hmm.
I think of my past in medical sales and how I shouldn't have ever had that job. It made no sense. I didn't have the skill for it, but God was using it to build leadership qualities in me.
True. Yes.
And I think too, even though where you're at, where it sometimes doesn't make sense, there's still influence there in a different way, but there's something God's after, right?
I agree, and it's funny that you said that because, the market is kind of tanking right now for lending. So it's where lenders are laying off loan officers and managers. There's huge layoffs right now.
Right.
We're having to be more aggressive, and so what that means to me is doing things I have in my entire I have avoided phone calls for the most part, like salesy
Mhm.
type things where I have to call people and
Yeah.
I have to present myself. I have to be like, hey, this is who I am. I've never wanted to do. Never. I even physically go out to offices and I'm like, I have to walk in confidently. And this is like, I'm glad that you brought that up because to be honest with you, I'm at a place in my life where it feels like some of those dreams that I still have in my heart are never going to happen because of my
Sure.
age. I'm 45. I'm not saying that's old, but I'm just saying it
Well,
feels
our
like,
expectation is that it happens younger.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And so, but when you said that, it was like it triggered within me, okay, you know what? Even this job that I thought was just about financial support and this is really my calling now, maybe it's still Yeah, there are things that God has for me that eventually, I may get to walk back into those. I don't know. I don't live for that. I live surrendered to Him because
Right.
really that's the only joy. I mean, get what you think that you want, it's probably not even going to bring the joy that you thought. He really
Oh
is
God.
the only joy. He really is. Like in His presence is fullness of joy. So I've learned that lesson as well. But yes, I believe that every season that we're in, it's preparing us for the next.
Yeah, because the life of Joseph, and I'm really glad you brought him up, because when I went through my dark season, uh, the Lord kept bringing me his story,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't really know, because we don't, and when we read the Word, we think it all, like his whole life just happened in a week. For some
Right.
reason, we don't realize it was 20 years or whatever. And I think we don't understand, some seasons are short. I never know how long a season is going to be.
Yes, right.
And I think that's part, like, you don't know how long this season will last with you working, because it's going to last as long as he needs it to last to get you where you're supposed to be. Same same with me in that prayer room. It lasted just long as it was supposed to, and then I had to move on to put people in other ways.
Yeah.
It so often, girl, it, in all honesty, doesn't make sense. And the more it doesn't make sense, usually the more I know it's the Lord.
Well, it's like art. I think I use this scripture, and this kind of, and maybe chapter 2 or 3, I talk about poema and what it really means.
Right.
It means a masterpiece that we are, Ephesians, I think is it 2:10, or it says we are God's masterpiece, or He is
Yeah.
poema, and
Yes.
created a new Christ that He created for us to do in advance. And
Right.
so this word poema, it really, when you look at it, in the original language, it really is what you would use to describe a work of art, literally, the Sistine Chapel or something like that. That's just breathtaking and amazing. And so you imagine, like, I mean, Michelangelo hung from ropes to paint that. It took him years to do it. And
Yes.
we're what God's creating, and even poem, that's where we get our word poem. And
Right.
it's art. So you can't say, you can't feel this way where you're like, this is wrong, or I don't understand what God's doing. Does anyone really understand what an artist is painting while they're painting it? Have you watched somebody paint? You're like, what in the world are they going to do with that? I mean, it doesn't,
Yes.
by the time they finish, it doesn't even look like what they started with. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what we do. We try to look at where we are in the beginning, and it looks so dark and it looks so bleak, and there's dark colors. And we're like,
Right.
how can He make something beautiful? But I'm still convinced, even where I am with my life and how nothing makes sense still to this day, that in the end it will be beautiful. I really believe that. And I believe that's true for all believers, if they will surrender to the process.
Oh, totally. I have something hanging in our middle room. It's Ecclesiastes 3:11. Everything is made beautiful
Yeah.
in its time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gains, the losses.
Yeah.
Um, it reminds me, you saying that reminds me of a poem I had written many years ago. I have it hanging out in the lobby. It's called The Color Red. And it just talks about, it's exactly what you're saying, how our lives are it's an artwork. And so I
Yeah.
don't, only the artist himself, the master artist, knows what color
Mm-hmm.
palette is mine.
Yeah.
And while his blood weaves all through that, there are specific and unique colors for my life on an easel, on a
Yeah.
canvas. And some of those are dark, right? I mean,
Yeah.
which kind of leads me, into, you've recently gone through a dark season, and
Yeah.
I went through one 10 years ago, and honestly, it's been 10 years getting me out of it.
Yeah.
Yet everything I went through during that time is now bearing fruit.
Mm.
And but it's not the fruit I ever wanted or asked
Yeah.
for.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I had messaged you earlier going, okay, because sometimes Providence takes us in unexpected places we didn't think, uh,
Yeah.
where it feels
Yeah.
like a wrecking ball just took our world apart.
And you don't see it coming. And I think that's even the gift of God, because I think if you knew that was coming,
Right.
you would just worry yourself sick or be depressed about it. So, with mine, of course, was just being in that 25-year marriage and thinking it would never end. And then my
Yeah.
ex-husband was deciding, hey, I don't want to be in this anymore, and really don't want to be in ministry. And basically he told me, I'm not the person. I'm tired of pretending like I'm this person. So what do you do with that? And tried to intercede and pray and get him to, I just kind of was hoping God would turn his heart, and that didn't happen. And so just the shock and the grief of walking through that, has, gosh, it's overwhelming. And I mean, there's, you still have those days where you wake up and you're like, is this my life now? I mean, like, it's, it's like your heart doesn't quite forget. Your head kind of moves on, but your heart sometimes remembers.
Sure.
And that happened this has all been in the last 2 years. So I mean, you can probably see, I mean, I think that's a lot of the reason why the Lord said, hey, I'm gonna kind of pull you out of public ministry for a while, because I mean, that was just a lot, and I haven't been releasing blogs. I stopped podcasting. I have recorded new songs, but I haven't released anything, and I haven't written my story with the divorce, because it was so raw, and I didn't even say, and I still don't know fully what to say. All I know is that God carried me, and that what I saw in him do in that season was he went before me. And to this day, I weep before heaven else. I say, I will never, God, don't ever let me forget what you did for me, because he carried me so beautifully through that season. He went before me and prepared it, and with financial provision and everything I needed. And I had no idea, I mean, I was a single woman trying to pay a mortgage, and I had bills, and he provided. And anyway, the story is that, after I was just shy of a month of our divorce being final, and God brought Mike into my life, the man that I ended up marrying. 3 months after my divorce was final. And that has been just.
But the Lord told you
beautiful.
he was bringing somebody too ahead of time.
He told me, and I couldn't believe it. I just fought with him. But when you hear the voice of the Lord, it's like, that wasn't him saying it. And he just kept saying it, and he wouldn't let it go. And he brought Mike, and it's great because we're so compatible. So that's something I had never had before, was just compatibility and just enjoying someone's presence and laughing all the time with them. Even if you're going through hard stuff together, you still laugh, you still enjoy each other. So it's been beautiful. And I realize now, that I believe that God set me free. I was in a marriage that I was unequally yoked. And I would have never, ever filed probably. I was just kind of raised that way. I've talked about that, and I have a whole other opinion on that, which I won't go into. But the Lord, the Lord worked it out, because he, and my ex-child, so I didn't even have to make that decision. And of course, I mean, I found out later some other things that just solidified, okay, this is over. And I mean, it was hard, and my heart goes out to anybody that's going through something like that. But I felt like 2020, God had said to me, this is a year that I'm going to realign families. I just didn't know he was going to realign mine. I thought that he was going to, and he did this. He did. A lot of people within their family got realigned, and their marriages were healed and restored. But there were some people, because 4 people that year, they were all in ministry, and all of them got divorced. And so my heart, of course, was grieved when I hear that. But then I realized that there were people that were together that were unequally yoked, and the Lord, I believe, said that's enough. That.
I deal a lot with that here.
Mm-hmm.
God had really retaught me on things like divorce, and
Yeah.
God knows when somebody's going to change and when they're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's I always had the question, and this could get me some heat for saying it, but I'm just not really ashamed of what I believe anymore. I don't necessarily believe every marriage was God ordained.
Yep. That's it. Same.
And so if he didn't approve it, he has every right to divide it.
Yes.
And if I go, and of course, this because we had this discussion, because our past theology is, it's not that we aren't pro marriage. I certainly am, but I'm for pro Christ centered marriage, and I'm for
Yeah.
women not being abused, and I'm for
Yeah. Right.
you know and that's the way marriage was intended to be. So if we're operating outside of that, and I no longer believe, and I'm glad you brought it up. I just said this the other night in a support group. Unequally yoked does not mean just being a believer versus an unbeliever.
Right. Right.
And it's because I see a lot of women growing in the Lord, pursuing Jesus, and I'm sure it happens on the other side of things too. But the husband chooses not to.
Yeah.
And that does eventually become a problem. And
Yeah.
it's not that they wanted it that way. I mean, most of them have tried everything and anything to fix it. So, again, providence, God knew.
Yeah.
He knew all of that was going to happen. And I do want to speak to this, Shanna, because I think maybe it was a struggle in your mind at one point, and I want to make it really clear to anybody going through this. Just because you go through a divorce, whether it's, you had no idea it was coming, or you did, I don't even care. But it does not mean God's plan for your life is now stopped or over.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, I mean, I'm just going to be honest, and I want to be kind, but it set me free. I
Yeah,
mean, can I just be honest? Because what was happening was I was not allowed to fully be who God created me to be.
right.
And I wasn't allowed to do the things that I felt like He had called me to do. It was always a fight, it was always a struggle.
Yeah,
And if you can't live out your life and your calling and be in a relationship like that, forever. And I had given it to the Lord, and I had said, I'm in a covenant, with
yeah,
you and Him, and I'm not going to sever it. So I need you to intervene, because you see what's happening. I'm being, um, I felt like controlled,
yeah.
and manipulated. And I think the Lord just put His foot down, and He said, that's enough, because it was miserable, and I wasn't able to be who I really am, which is not the case anymore. I am now, but I think a lot of women are trapped in that, and it's not okay.
No, it's not okay. It's actually not part of never was part of God's plan.
Mm-mm.
And
Mm-mm.
and that's where I think there's a lot of correction coming and a rescue's coming,
Yeah.
because we've taught in quite the error, I should say.
Mm.
We've we've leaned on the side that of oppression instead of freedom. Um, and again, it's not that we don't believe in fighting. I don't tell people whether to stay or leave, but I know God will lead you out or lead you to stay.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a real safe place to be, when you're letting Him do the leading.
Right. And if you're scared to make the choice, you can just say, Lord, you're just going to have to do this, and you're going to have to get in here and intervene if this needs to be dealt with, and you're going to have to
Yeah,
do it, because that's where I was.
right.
I think there was a lot of fear, and I'm just going to be honest. I was like, can I support myself? Can I, those kind of thoughts run through your mind when you haven't been working and you don't have income.
Right.
Um, but like I said, God was so gracious to come in and just prepare that and provide for me. And He became my husband in that
It,
season.
exactly. He showed you what it was like for Him to arrive as the husbandman.
Oh gosh. And you know what? Now that you say that, because you said a minute ago, when we were talking about women being controlled, and sometimes it can be, the other way around. Somebody's controlling the
Yeah.
other one. But I kept going back in that season of my life. I lived in Song of Solomon. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, when Mike and I said our vows, we read out of chapter 2, and it's so beautiful. But one of the things that just always stands out to me that I think the Lord does for us as the bride of Christ, but I think that He wants to do this in marriages in the earth is what you see is, in chapter 2, he talks about how or maybe even 3, how he's planted this vineyard of love within her. And then
Yeah.
all these beautiful blooms, and there's just these flowers and trees, and all these things are growing, but he planted those in her. And I think that's, to be honest with you, I think we're coming into this revelation in marriages where God is saying, hey, the role of a husband is not just to protect and provide, but also, like, you see in your wife these beautiful callings, these
Right.
things that need to be nurtured and covered. And so my husband does this so well, where he is like, you go out there and you do it, and I will stand over here and cheer for you, and I will applaud you, and I will be like your support, because you need to be doing that. And
Yeah.
that's, I think God's
That's it. Because I said to a group the other night, I said, marriage is like God wanted so my husband should be as much of a helpmate to me as I am to him. I don't know why we get that all like it's all one person's responsibility to help. And because that word is the same word used for helper, the Holy Spirit.
Yes, it is.
For help,
Yeah.
we don't think he's something we're gonna he's my God. I'm
Right.
not less than me in
Yes.
the
Yes.
submissive way. But don't let me forget my train of thought, Lord. What I said to the women was, your husband should be pulling out all of Jesus in you, and you should be pulling out of him all of Jesus in him. That's
Yeah.
what Christ's marriage is supposed to be like.
Yeah. I
It
agree
it is
completely.
never that one or the other disappears so somebody can be dominant.
Yes. Right.
So, and that's been, I think, part of the issue. I said, you were made for more than you I said, part of your job as a helper is righteousness,
Mm-hmm.
not just to bring him to his dinner.
Yeah.
Can we just all get a grip?
Right.
Like, I'm called to say, guess what, that's, we're going to choose today whom we will serve. There are certain things that won't happen here in my house, all those kind of things, but that's not what we tell women. We act like we
Yeah.
can't speak up for any of those things, but that is not biblical.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
part of, providence in your life and in many others is God rescuing and making changes, because he's
Yeah.
the one that the scripture you quoted earlier about, the good works that were stored up for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He's gonna make sure that gets done.
Yeah, it's on him. I mean, that's his role. If he's guiding and sustaining our destiny, then, and I'm not saying we don't do things, but
Sure.
ultimately, he, like you said, he will rescue you if he needs to. And I have been rescued so many times. I mean, I can't even
Well,
count.
if anything, anybody has exalted itself above him, he may come handle it, right?
That's right. Yeah. He'll give them
And
chances after chances. And then if they don't
yeah.
line up, he's like, this is enough. I mean,
Right. And
it's
I'm
not,
not sure, Shanna, why we think it happens in every relationship but marriage, because now that I know what I know, I'm like, of course he would hold that to a high standard. And
yeah.
um I and I told the ladies the other night, I said, sometimes the sword comes to divide. It's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I didn't come to bring peace, I came to bring a sword.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that doesn't
Exactly.
mean that it won't happen within our own families at times.
Yeah, I would just, and I don't want people to live in fear, but I would have never guessed that was going to happen to me.
Right. You
And
weren't
there's,
looking for it. You weren't trying to make that happen. It
yeah,
wasn't even something you wanted.
yeah, and I hate that because, but it just shows you that we just live in a fallen world, and we're
Right.
all going to be touched by it. We're all going to be, somebody else's trauma is not going to be mine, and the same is true with me. I'm not going to go through what they go through, but I just know that even in it, God is faithful.
Yes.
I know that. And if anything, it helped me to come to know him better in ways I didn't know him before.
Yeah. And to, we know there's a spiritual war going on. We know the devil has plenty to play in these situations. Yet God immediately goes to work for our good in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Romans 8:28 is so true and so real.
Yeah. It totally is. So,
Yeah.
when we talk about providence, there's a lot of things at play. It's like a chessboard a little bit,
Yes.
Um, not that we're pawns or anything to the Lord, but there's a whole lot of things working at once.
Well, it's funny that you said that. I went to a conference for work a few weeks ago, and the whole thing was about chess.
Really?
Like the theme of it was chess, and they had a master chess player up there who was giving a speech about it, and he said, "Do you know that it's the only game that's ever been invented that can't fully be solved? Meaning there are billions of moves that can be made."
Mm.
Billions of moves in it be made. I had no idea. Did you know that? I didn't know
Oh
that.
gosh, no, I know
Yeah,
nothing about chess.
yeah. I'm thinking checkers, you know.
Me too.
But chess is extremely. I mean, you have to be just a genius to really play it well.
Yeah.
So, and every time, the last couple of years, the Lord has really been bringing that to me. I've been seeing that prophetically, the chessboards and things like that, because we can get all worked up about what's going on with our economy or our nation, or is this war over here going to happen, and all these things.
Yeah.
And what I kept seeing was the Lord, and then he had a chessboard and he was playing chess. I mean,
That's
and I
cool.
think that he's doing that with our lives too. And there are so many moves that he could make that we would never even think of.
Mm-hmm.
Either
Mm-hmm.
rescue us or deliver us or whatever it is, or position us.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're great moves and they feel really good. I mean, and like my marriage this last year, that was a move that I never saw coming, meeting Mike and how happy we are.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it's a really painful move that God makes,
Sure.
but it's for our good still.
And I guess maybe the point is we end up, the older we get, it's a little easier to accept things. Maybe it's because we have some longevity with him, you
I think,
think, and
yeah,
we learn how to trust him better.
we just know him. We know
Yeah.
him personally, and it's all about relationship. Everything in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's with each other or with him.
Yeah.
We have history with him, and we just know, okay, you know what? When that lie pops into your head that whatever just happened to you was terrible, and you start thinking bad thoughts about God and how could he allow it, and then you remember, no, I know him. Like I know him. He wouldn't.
He's for me, not against me. Yeah.
Or he's going to turn this somehow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't drag us down quite the way it did when we were in our 20s or 30s.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to add to Providence
Now,
that we missed?
yeah, so I wrote that book in 2000. Well, I wrote the song in 2009 or 8. Wrote the book in 2000, I think 18. And I thought, okay, well, this is signed, sealed, delivered. This is great. I'm set. And then my life has taken so many twists and turns since then. I feel
Right.
like I need to write Providence #2 or the
Yeah.
sequel, something, whenever, because I don't know, I'm still kind of in transit, but I just want to tell people that, yeah, I mean, he's with you, he's for you, and he is doing something beautiful.
Oh, totally. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes he's trying to change our perspective. You talking about volume 2 of Providence. Since we're living in a world that is pretty soon getting rid of CDs,
Yeah.
we're in the era. We're going to see what happened, how it was like with 8 tracks and cassettes, with the CD. The Lord had shown me to start using my songs in seasons. In other words, there's a song for every season.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so compiling my music now is more for, okay, this is for the brokenhearted. This is for somebody needing faith to move on with the Lord. This one is a prophetic song. never would I have considered that in my past. But it's because so much of the twists and turns that I've had, like you, we write out of those seasons.
Yeah.
And, the providence of God is like, wow, Lord, I can kind of see what you're getting, what you're wanting to get out of this now.
Yeah. Yeah. As you look back over it, you come out of it. Oh, well, let me write that down. It's like, the monument thing that every time, or it wasn't a monument. What was he built? It wasn't an altar either, was it? I can't remember. Abraham, every time he would move around, he would build, I guess it was an altar.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
It was like a monument so that it would memorialize that. And I sometimes think as a writer, that's one of the best things you can do is, in the middle of it, or when you are starting to come out of it, you write it down so you don't forget,
Exactly.
Yeah.
It helps us too to go back
Mm-hmm.
and remember, oh wow, what that was really like. It's like childbirth. You kind of forget some things. But it's the same thing with spiritual births. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of pushing, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of waiting.
Yeah.
But eventually that baby comes forth,
Right.
Well, girl, I appreciate you hanging on here with me, and it was a good talk, and you'll probably be back, because even as we're talking, I'm like, oh, we need to come back and do a podcast on this topic and this topic.
Yeah, I love it. This kind of stuff. I'm just grateful you let me do it. The opportunity.
No, I appreciate it. Hey, is your website still the same? You want to give it to the people?
Yeah, it's shanastrange.net, and yeah, it's still strange. So I decided to keep that as my stage name. I guess we're talking about not having stages, but I kept it because I had so much music under that name, and I had released books and everything. So, and then I would say I would love it if people would sign up for my email list, just because I'll be, when I do release new music and things like that, you would know, you'd be the first to know. So
right. Okay, that's cool. Well, I appreciate you, girl. I hope you have a good week.
All right, you too.
All right, bye.
Thanks, bye.
We hope today's episode has blessed you and encouraged you to pursue Christ passionately. To join us again for more encouragement, equipping, and empowering, subscribe to the 320 Podcast. We would also like to invite you to enjoy our round-the-clock radio station, Royalty for Real Radio for Women, at royaltyforreal.com. That's royalty, the number 4, real.com.